Welcome everyone to our first Tableau user group event for 2021. My name is Chris Monahan and I'm the president of Zeomatrix. We're one of the two Tableau partners along with Technion Data Solutions that sponsors the Texas TUG. So we help organize the monthly meetings along with the help of our amazing members of the TUG Advisory Council. So hats off to our advisory council for all the help and work that they do as far as investing the time every month in planning these events and lining up the speakers. If you'd be interested in joining our advisory council, please reach out to me or someone on the council and we can send you some information and you can join our group. So for those of you that are new first timers, welcome. Just to give you a little bit of a back history about our group. We started with our roots as the Austin TUG before we went virtual in April last year. And we since combined forces with some of the folks from the Dallas-Fort Worth TUG, as well as the San Antonio TUG and even the Houston TUG. And now we're rebranded as the Texas TUG. So it's been a great success. And we've been holding these events monthly for the past year. And due to being virtual, every event has gotten bigger than the last. So I'm very happy to announce that we have set a new all-time record. We have 400 registrants for this event today. And they're from all over the country. So thank you to all of you for your interest and your participation. It's just amazing to see everyone's passion for data and their love for Tableau. So with that, we have a great event planned for you today. So let's review the agenda and then we'll move on to the presentations. So the agenda today, we'll kick off just a few formal announcements, go over basic rules of the meeting itself, highlight a couple of new events and initiatives we have here that Tableau is sponsoring, and then we'll jump into the presentations. So our first speaker is going to be Eric Weber, and he's going to do a presentation on why good data products are hard to build. And then we'll do a Q&A, and then we have the team of Whole Foods Market here, and they're going to be doing a presentation on growing analytics organically, basically their journey with Tableau. And then we'll do a panel discussion with them afterwards, and then we'll close with some closing remarks. So the meeting format, in case you guys have never used Zoom before, it's a live meeting. So in the past, we had done webinar formats, but we find that the live meeting is a lot more engaging. So there's a couple rules though with live meetings that we want everyone to just sort of etiquette to abide by. First of all, you're not obligated to share your video. Share it if you wish, but you're not obligated to. We want this to be a sort of a community of sorts. So if you want to show your faces, please do. Gallery viewing is the best. So in the top right-hand corner, there's a little button. So if you want to click gallery view, then you can see everybody's faces there. Observe general Zoom etiquette. Obviously, when you're not speaking, please go on mute. And we want everyone to participate. We want to make this interactive. So there is a chat window down below. Feel free to make any comments, chat with others, post any links, right, that you find or have questions. Specifically around questions, we're going to be, for the presentations, what we're going to do is we're going to be holding a Q&A after each speaker. So please save your questions until after the presentation. Certainly during the presentation, if you want to add your questions to the chat, I'll be monitoring that window, and then we can field those questions at the end to our guest speakers. If you'd like, you could also unmute at the very end and ask your question live. So feel free to do that. One little thing that we are changing up with this particular TUG is that we're going to do a short series of surveys. So we've done some surveys in the past after the fact, but what we're going to do this time is I'm going to put a link in the chat window after each presenter, and it's just a simple yes/no question on what your thoughts were about the presenter. So if you guys could be so kind as to fill that out, that'll give us feedback so that we can make these events just even better for you guys every time. So let's just cover a couple topics here. Tableau wanted us to announce a sort of a new game that they came out with, a new challenge. They are asking each TUG to sort of participate in a challenge and to see which TUG will win. I personally think we have the best one, and so I think we have a good chance. But what they call it is the New Year, New Skills TUG Challenge. And the way it basically works, they're asking each group to fill out a survey, and they want to see who can fill out the most surveys to be the winner. The survey, it's called a learning quiz, and basically it's a 3-minute survey. I've taken it myself. It's super easy. A couple multiple choice questions. And basically the idea of the survey is to help you guys identify sort of what learning paths or e-learning material is available to you. So there's a couple skills and skill paths that were recommended to me personally based on my questions and really insightful. So that's information online that is available to me that I can go take a look at now. So how can you guys help us win this challenge? There is a bit.ly link that I will send out here shortly during the actual during our actual event, but I will also send it out in the survey in an email afterwards as well. Please take the time to fill it out. That would help us greatly. Share it on social media, share it with your friends. And then I think we have a good fighting chance. So you might ask, well, why? What's in it for me? And what's the prize? Well, so we win. If we win, we get a meeting with Francois, who's Tableau's chief product officer. And if you guys have never heard him speak or have never been to Tableau conference, he is amazing. He is very insightful, inspirational speaker and gives a lot of details into the product itself, what's on the roadmap and what people are asking for. So if we win, he's going to be at our next tug and we get to pick the topic of choice. Now, maybe it'll be Tableau related, or maybe we pick something else just to put him on the spot. But the fact is I think we have a good shot at winning. So everybody please participate and look for that email. And the last slide here, a bit of housekeeping, is we have some upcoming events. So, you know, we have a lot of events that are just related to Tableau, but we certainly want to highlight some that are just interesting to our community as a whole. So one event that's coming up is called the Women in Data Science Women in Data Science Worldwide Conference. That's going to be held on March 8th. It's I put a link below so you guys can register. For you that are not familiar with WIDS, it's an organization that started about 5 years ago out of like basically a day technical conference at Stanford University, and now it's worldwide. So their goal is to help and inspire and educate data scientists, regardless of gender. And then they also help support women in the data analytics field. So it's a great organization. I encourage all of you to check it out. If you have any interest in it, check out the website or please contact Linda Brewster Meffert. I'll have her information listed there, and she's the ambassador for WIDS, and she can give you some more information. Lastly, last bit of housekeeping is we have our next tug on February 25th. So everybody circle your calendars right now, mark it down. It's going to be a great event, and we'll be sending out an email soon for that. So that's it for a little bit of housekeeping. We'll skip to the good stuff now for the presentation. So our first presenter, who I'm happy to have present to us today, is Eric Weber. Eric is the GM of experimentation at Yelp. He has an extensive background in mathematics and analytics, and he loves working with data and helping others learn about data. So if you've not heard Eric speak before, I suggest you sort of follow him on LinkedIn. He has a lot of insightful posts, just from topics of like how to just learn to be a data scientist, just a lot of great information. So I encourage you guys to check him out. So Eric's going to give us a presentation today on why good data products are hard to build. So very interesting topic. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Eric.
All right, here is the the real moment of truth where you lose 90% of your intelligence as you try to actually share your screen and do something useful. That's usually how it goes. I'm going to assume you can see this. Good to go?
Yeah.
All right. So first of all, thank you for having me today. I know that also having this size of a group it's hard to build this size of a community anywhere. There's a lot of different opportunities in data. There's a lot of different conferences that are organized. And so that speaks a lot to the quality and breadth and depth of the group that we have this group here today. I'm going to focus specifically on data products today and visualizations in particular. To give you some context, so you might be wondering, like, what do you actually do at Yelp? Like, I have no idea what that title means. You're not the only one. I ask myself that some days too. It generally, I had our product experimentation group. So that means when we're trying to understand the impact of changes on our product, small of a change as we change a color slightly, a certain button, versus we overhaul the entire user experience for Yelp, anything in that area. And the purpose of that area is us to be able to say, if we make this change, this is what we anticipate will happen for our users. This is the user behavior that we expect to change. This is the impact that we expect to see on revenue. Certainly for us, where we're have inbound monthly active users in the 100 million range, it makes a huge difference. Any small changes have a huge impact downstream. So what I focus on a lot, though, is building data products. And I know that this phrase, sometimes when I share it, people are like, what is a data product? I have no idea what you're actually talking about. My perspective, and the reason that I'm speaking about this today, is that we talk a lot about data science, we talk a lot about building dashboards and visualizations. We need to talk about them more as products than we do. In similar vein, when we think about the creation of a product, the management of a product, the improvement and iteration of a product, and eventually the deprecation or sunsetting of a product, the same principles apply to when we're building things with data. And to get to that point, there are a lot of things that you have to consider. So I'm going to focus on those today, with the context being visualization. So there's how we talk about the life cycle of a visualization, and then the reality check of how visualizations tend to go. And this is true for many data products. We spend 2 weeks building the visualization and perfecting it. And then we spend 2 more weeks trying to figure out why the data is not connecting to the visualization in the right way, or why there's 100 different variations of ways to spell Mississippi in our data set, and it's blowing up the entire dashboard. We eventually get to having one awesome day in the sun where we get to present the visualization and show all of our hard work. And we leave it off saying, here are the next steps. We want people to use this visualization to make decisions. Generally speaking, most organizations I've been a part of, you have a 7-day window where people actually look at it, and then user activity just drops off a map. There's a very well-defined fork in the road after those 7 days, where either your visualization continues to live on, or potentially it doesn't. And if you are part of any company, one of the most challenging, but also I think useful exercises is to take stock of all of the different data products that have been created, from dashboards to metrics, metrics views, whatever it may be, and then think about how often they're used, and how often, and not even how often they're used, how many people know what they are. You'll find a lot of things that continue to persist and exist for companies years down the road that nobody knows are really even there. They were created by someone who was previously at the company. They were created for a specific use case that is no longer the focus of that company. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is an important thing to consider, is that a lot of things that we invest a great deal of effort into don't have a long life cycle behind them. And that, to me, is something that we shouldn't just take as a fact. It's something that we have to think about trying to actually address. So if you think about the reasons why visualizations fail, and you could, wherever in this presentation I say visualizations, dashboards, whatever, you could just say data product. This is in general saying, why do data products tend to fail? Generally speaking, trustworthiness is the primary reason they fail. I'm sure that you've been in the scenario where you put a ton of effort into building something. It looks beautiful. You've thought about every edge case, and you user tested it. It feels right. You present it. And right after, somebody says, well, this doesn't look right to me. And it is one of the most frustrating things in the world, because 99.9% of things are fine. Yet I often find that you have a trust, sort of have a break in that trust. And it's really hard to get people to buy into the rest of it. This is something that I think you see around products in general, is that creating trustworthiness around what you build is really important. The second reason is that sometimes the user doesn't know what to do with the visualization or the product, right? So imagine that you don't have a lot of familiarity with data and you're not the one who built a particular dashboard. And someone sends you the link and they say, here, you'll find this useful. Well, what's going to make them find it useful? What are they supposed to look at? What kind of decisions are they supposed to make as a consequence of having seen this? This is a really tricky and I think underappreciated area, is that people often don't know how to use the things that we create, and that usability and the translation to user action is really important. Certainly, the visualization can almost be more confusing than helpful. If you've ever seen, well, you could go back and think about maybe one of the first dashboards I built at a company. I look back at it now thinking, like, how on earth did anybody make any sense of this? This is a complete disaster. Why are there so many different colors and lines moving in different directions? Reality is we often make things more complex than they need to be. And we don't have simple messages. And that guarantees that you will not have the right actions or insights that are generated from the things that you build. The fourth issue is sometimes people have no idea something exists. If you think about how many times you've in your life have heard from somebody, you should download this app, it does this awesome thing, or you should go to this website, it has this amazing reference. And that just becomes a habit for you, but you didn't know it existed until that moment. There's also a lot of data products floating around that have potential to be helpful, but at the same time, they have to know that they exist. And we've all been in the land of companies where searching internal documentation and finding where things exist is one of the most challenging issues that we come across. Managing that is really hard. And this is something that I really want to emphasize is it's generally not the user's fault. I get into a lot of conversations, this is in particular with people who are building data products, where they say, well, the user just didn't do this, or the user didn't know this. Well, the user doesn't have a job to say, like, I know exactly how to use your visualization, or I know how to do this. It's our job. And thinking about how to do that is something that I think is underappreciated. It's undervalued, and the impact of doing it right, fortunately, has a huge upside. So this gets to where I'm going to connect this idea of visualization to a product. If you think about any visualization that you've built, like what makes it successful? We talk a lot about product market fit in the abstract. We talk about, so at Yelp, if we're going to launch a new product, we want to make sure that it's going to have a certain need in the market, that it's going to fit the needs. So for example, we want consumers to be able to take a particular action to search for a particular type of restaurant or company. Maybe internally, you realize that, okay, our executive team needs to be able to see this data updated on a regular basis. And they continue to ask for it over and over and over again. And it generally creates, when someone asks for it, suddenly there's this mad scramble to produce this documentation of insight. Now, here are the numbers. And it comes up over and over and over again. That is something like evaluating product market fit. You're able to find, how does this connect with what our internal organization needs? Something we also don't think about a lot is our total addressable market. So if you've been around any startup or in any trying to raise funds or anything like that, we ask, what's the TAM? How many people can we impact? How much revenue can we touch here? So when we think about data visualizations, I often don't hear the question asked, like, what is the potential ROI of building this? How many decisions can it affect? How much of the company potentially is going to use something like this? To me, this is often why some dashboards, like, if we invest 2 months of someone's time and we have options to put them into option A or option B, how do we decide that? We should have some sense of who it potentially is going to impact. It's also really important to consider return behavior. Just like any product, they typically have this new user spike of activity where people come and check it out for the first time and they never come back. Trying to build repeat behavior and trying to help build a visualization in such a way that people do come back to it is really important. I'm not saying I'm good at this. I'm just saying that I know it when I see it. and what I want to emphasize as I'm saying these things is they're hard. There's no, this is not a 5 easy steps to, changing your entire company. This is more trying to explain why it's hard and think about the different things that we have to address along the way. Getting awareness of your product is hard, right? If you think about the amount of money that is spent on advertising about products to get us to pay attention to something across social channels, TV, whatever it may be, internally at most companies, there's also a lot of products floating around. For people that I work with on different executive teams, their most common thing is to say, like, I have a flood of dashboards. I don't know which one to look at, and I don't know when to look at it. It's a very real question, and it's definitely a big challenge. And the last one is switching costs. This is a concept that we talk a lot about in product, but not a lot about in data, is that it's hard to change people's behavior. It's really hard to change behavior for a sustained period of time. So just because we build something doesn't mean that someone's behavior is going to change. They have to have some incentive to do so. So if you put out this beautiful Tableau dashboard and it looks wonderful, it has all of the right data, everything is going well, and then you wonder why people are not using it. If they potentially have an alternative, it's very challenging to get them to flip away from an existing habit to go to a new product. And all of these things, like all of what I'm saying here, is why it's useful to think about a data visualization as a product. It doesn't mean it's the only way to think about it, but this framing kind of addresses some of the different concerns we need to take into account. So how do we get to success, right? What does it look like to be successful in this space? And I've tried to bring some parallels about, for anyone who doesn't want to think about economics, you should probably, mute me for a second. But if you think about what creates success, something that often does create success is if you're a monopoly in your company. If you are the only provider of data in your company, you have an advantage because no one can get to it otherwise. This was true. I saw this as being true in many companies around 2011 and 2012, where it first started being, people first started to ask more about analytics and data science and algorithms, is that there was one area of the company that essentially had access and was able to provide access to data. And so any product that you created was immediately somewhat successful because you were the only game in town. There was no self-serve option. There was no other way to get to it. But if you're in a competition where there are multiple ways to get data and visualize it, then you have to think carefully about, what does your product do better than status quo? Or what does your product do better than someone else's? It might be a weird way to think, and I fully recognize that this doesn't always reflect how people talk about data internally, but it's true. Like, I focus a lot on thinking about user behavior, and I focus a lot on thinking about user adoption. These market dynamics, just as they're present outside of work, they are present at work. And the same thing happens here. So a good question to ask, is your visualization a SaaS product that people want to essentially subscribe to, meaning they're going to continue to invest something, in this case, probably their time and energy on a regular basis to engage with it? Or is it going to be something that they just want to use once, right? This is this kind of question, and it sounds weird, But I promise you that if you frame and ask questions this way, it's going to make you think about your product in a very different way. The fourth point is that you need to sell and market your product. Even if you have control of the entire market, if people are not aware that it exists, that's going to be a big challenge. I look to this as very much internally around the concept of like last mile delivery, is that you can build something that works super well. You can build something that functionally reveals great things about the business. But if people don't have an easy way to get it in their hands or get it in front of them on their computer, it may as well not exist. And that's kind of a hard truth, because there are definitely been dashboards I built in the past that I thought were the best thing ever. And then I looked at usage stats a month later and 2 people had touched it. That's kind of a sad but true reality that you fight with. And lastly, this idea of if I build it, they'll come. There's a lot of things that have died in this in under this hope. It really doesn't, and that doesn't mean that it's bad. Of course, we want to build really cool things. We want to build beautiful visualizations that allow people to understand the business in a compelling way. But it's not just the building of it, right? It's the building of it and having these ideas like product market fit, having these ideas like, how is this going to play into our executive team? Or how is this going to play into our product management team? If you build it without thinking actively about the marketing and how you're going to sell it and how you're going to make people aware of it and how you're going to achieve product market fit, it's going to be challenging. People will not just automatically come because something nice has been constructed. And I like sometimes when I give these presentations and I think about things like this, it can sometimes come off as negative. I don't intend it to come off as negative. I intend it to come off as, this is why it's challenging. This is why it's hard. And if we face that reality of why it's hard, it makes us more effective at our jobs. So if you walk into an interview and your perspective, whatever you may be doing with Tableau, whatever you may be doing with data, is that I want to join the company to build dashboards. That's an incomplete way to say, I haven't really worked on these things before. Like what that says is, you want to build things, but why do you want to build things here at this company? What do you want them to do, right? What action do you want them to take as a result of it? And so if you're thinking about, career changes, career development, think about responding to the question, how do you assess the impact of your work? All of these things that I've mentioned up to this point are a good way to reflect on that. Like, how much has your work actually changed the organization? Now, a lot of presentations that I go to, that people give regularly, are often very much about some theoretical abstract concept. I like to start much more with, let's be practical. You can't just, I want you to walk away and think about, what can you actually do to start thinking in this way? And it's not, take this presentation and map it to your work. I don't think that's a useful thing to do. First of all, just actually look at the usage stats on your dashboards. This is something that can be a little bit uncomfortable. It's also scary. It feels like you're about to click and you're like, okay, is this going to be good or is this going to be depressing? I'm not quite sure. But you should do it just to be aware, just to get a sense of, what are people doing with this dashboard? How often are people visiting? I encourage you to think about looking at repeat behavior. A lot of internal company statistics are skewed by one-time hits. That means people go there once and they never come back. It's really valuable to be able to speak to, like, who are the people that come back and why do they come back? I often go and look at dashboards, and if people are coming back regularly, I go talk to them. I want to know, like, what are they finding useful? What are they finding, like, why are they coming back? Sometimes it can be depressing because they say, oh, I just had it as I stored the link and it just pops up and it automatically pops back up. So it looks like they're visiting, but generally you get good insights into, they find it useful. Something for 3 and 4, it's really about doing user research. And I tend to find people who are best at data science, I don't care what data title it may be, is that they try to understand what results in success and what results in failure. And there are some things that we have no control over when it comes to success or failure, right? There are some factors that we can't go make somebody look at a visualization before they make a decision. But we can create the best potential opportunity for them to do so. And we can try to help them understand why it would be valuable to do that. There are characteristics of dashboards and visualizations that certainly result in success or failure. My inability to think about design and my lack of performance in art and visualization in general is probably not a good representation, but like I would blame a lot of that on me. This is also why I go to our product design team and ask them to like tear apart my dashboards. They're like, oh, that doesn't look good at all. Okay, all right, I will go and redouble my effort. And when you think about things to work on, and I see these things pay off, this is what I see in the product managers that I have on my teams. This is what I see across Yelp, is that having empathy for the end user is really important. Just because you get frustrated that someone doesn't use your dashboard or whatever data product it is, doesn't mean that they're wrong. It just means that you probably need to understand what their value proposition is and why they would want to use something. We have a responsibility for not just designing something, but marketing and impact. Again, that idea of bringing it over that last gap. Why does someone want to pick this up? They need to be aware of it and understand its use case. And something that I will advocate is being a product manager. While the definition of that may be different across companies, anyone who's working with data and building something like a dashboard in some ways has to act like a product manager. You have to think about why you're designing it, who's it for, what's the complexity around it, what's the ROI, like why would people come back? These questions are not inherently comfortable to ask because it's a lot less fun than building something that looks great. But when it comes to like where to spend your time and certainly for where to deliver value, like having that mindset is often a key differentiator for what I see between success and failure when we're building data products. So with that in mind, I just to recap, right? This building good data products is hard and that won't change. It's not something that we're eventually going to move to like, okay, this is an easy process. Here's the cookbook for doing so. But understanding why it's hard and what the key pain points are is most important. And what I've mentioned here, from thinking about product market fit to thinking about actually marketing and creating awareness around your product, to making sure that you have empathy for the end user, these are all characteristics of things that I see that create success for people who are building data products. So I will leave it there, and thank you all for putting up with my stories. And there are many failures. I talk about things that are successful. There's a lot more failures than success in my past work.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Eric. That was a great presentation. I think it's a really interesting observation and way to look at it too. A lot of us, especially those of us that work with a lot of executives on a day-to-day operational basis, don't ever get a chance to even stop and ask like, what is the value in this, and what is our return, the ROI? And so, I did have a question for you. As far as you talked about raising awareness, right? Especially. I like the idea of what you said, almost like in economics, there's a competition there too, right? Hey, the sales team provides this number, finance provides this number. Where do we go to get the information? Like, what approaches have you seen where people have, what methods have you used to try to raise awareness, trying to market your product a little bit better?
Yeah, it's one, it's not easy. There's not a magic like send out an email. I can tell you that sending out an email is probably the least effective approach that I find. If I send out an email being like, go look at this visualization, it often doesn't result in anything. I try to take a much more active approach. Presentations in all hands, presentations in team meetings, trying to make sure that there's a solid one-page debrief about a particular product or set of products that can be easily shared around. Simple is better. And I think just like if you were thinking about creating awareness around a product elsewhere, the idea of a product launch and follow up to that product launch is similarly really important. Create some energy around it. Even if you don't launch every dashboard on the 3rd of the month, maybe you make the 3rd of the month the day that you announce the things that have come out in the previous month. So I actually find like monthly announcements, summaries, recaps, newsletters to be actually pretty effective. One-off emails, generally not. But I think the important part is people often have to hear it multiple times, and that's okay. And you're probably going to have to go to more than one team meeting, and you're going to have to follow up and remind people that something exists. That would be how I tend to think about disseminating it. Sometimes I'll just be annoying and just ping people a few times until they respond and say like, here,
Right.
have you looked at this yet? It's really cool. Like we should
Right.
look at this. Or if I'm in a one-on-one, I'll just be like, have you seen this? There's not a perfect path, and it often very much depends on the culture that you have built around data and using data products. But I think those are some general principles I use. And of course, every every company is slightly different.
Yeah.
Hey, Eric, we're getting lots of shout outs to you on the chat, but we did have one question.
Sure.
It says, do you have any advice to overcome the issue of trustworthiness?
Yeah,
Good question.
So trustworthiness, I think this is a really good question, because often people blame the data for a lack of trustworthiness, and they say like our data is not good enough. There's no hope that someone's going to trust it. I think it's more about you being the intervening messenger that, hey, data is never perfect, but here's what we're doing about it. Data is never perfect, but here's how we try to guard against it. When people see that there are active steps that are taken and awareness that is put forth in a dashboard or where else, that you are trying to account for data issues and you're literally trying to do the best you can to be defensive around that, that actually creates trust. It's when, so if you think about two scenarios, the first scenario is one in which someone notices that your dashboard has this weird behavior and they're like, oh, well, if that's wrong, then like everything else must be wrong. And they don't talk to you about it. They just stop using it, right? This is very common. Other scenario is you proactively on the dashboard or in training where you introduce it, you say like, this is how we're addressing known data issues. And this is how we deal with edge cases. And you might see things pop up, but that can be like, that's okay. The reaction to scenario 1 versus 2 is going to be incredibly different. And so the more that you can get in front of that messaging, the better off you're going to be in landing and creating that trustworthiness. People just want to know that you're paying attention to it and that you understand their pain points. And if you try to be proactive in that, it's an enormously helpful thing.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Eric. That was incredibly insightful. Appreciate everybody. Virtual round of applause, I guess. Silent applause for Eric. Thank you very much. So let me go ahead and we'll switch gears now. I'll share my screen. And go ahead and we'll tee up our next presentation. So our next group, I'm happy to introduce is the team from Whole Foods Market. They're local here in Austin, but I'm sure all of you guys nationwide have visited and are loyal patrons of Whole Foods. We have John Burns and Andrew Nafziger that are going to be sharing their view and sort of their journey with Tableau. It's called Growing Analytics Organically. So, John's the senior labor and employment compliance analyst at Whole Foods. He's also one of our Tug Advisory Board members. So he has been petitioning us to have them present here for the last couple months, as William mentioned. So he's the one responsible for coordinating and making this happen. Andrew is the Senior Manager of Analytics Solutions. He's someone I've known for many years, and he's just a all-around master in his craft as well. So, with that, I will turn it over to you, John, if you could kick us off.
Thanks, Chris, and hello and welcome everyone. Good afternoon. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to introduce our next speaker. He's an expert when it comes to business intelligence and analytical solutions, and has played an instrumental role at Whole Foods Market in facilitating Tableau adoption within the organization. Today, he's going to talk about the journey that Whole Foods Market has been on with using Tableau, and he's going to share some best practice tips as well as some lessons learned. And with that, I am pleased to welcome Andrew Nefsinger. Take it away.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. I have known Chris for many years, and he's always been a joy to work with. Done a lot of great projects together. We'll do a Q&A at the end of this, just to let you know in advance. We're going to have a couple extra people participate in the Q&A. We have Ray Sanchez, our Tableau administrator here, as well as a couple of our partners at Whole Foods. Let's see. Okay. So I'm sure you all know about Whole Foods. Whole Foods is a grocery store that started in Austin back in 1980. Here's a picture of the original store, which is just down on Lamar. I think it's Goodwill still, if I remember right. And at this point, the company's grown to over 500 stores in the US, UK, and Canada, and we have more than 95,000 team members. Just a little bit about me. I'm a senior team leader on Analytics Solutions. I've been at Whole Foods for about 6.5 years. I started doing development work with several components in our analytics stack, and I've also led development as well as application administration teams. And right now I'm leading the application administration team for Tableau. I first used Tableau back in 2012 when I was working at a startup, and my boss just happened to run across it and started using the mapping features. And we were trying to figure out what zip codes to direct our marketing services at, and Tableau was just a godsend, and loved it ever since. Prior to Tableau at Whole Foods, we had several legacy reporting systems, and they were kind of your typical reporting systems that you would see at a large company, and they were all very row and column focused, and there was a lot of data dump that happened. That was primarily the way people would interface with the tools. They would dump the data out, put them in Excel, do a pivot table, and do their analysis there. As can happen with those kinds of multiple systems, frequently the numbers didn't match, and that was a constant source of churn. And you would always hear about these presentations with vice presidents where they're going over some sort of project proposal or whatever it is, and the entire presentation gets derailed by a sales number that's maybe 2% off, and the difference isn't material, but ultimately, everybody can't resist the rabbit hole, even though it doesn't really affect the conversation. And so that was a constant pain point with the multiple legacy systems. And so there was a real desire to have a unified platform where everybody could be pointed to as the source of truth. They also wanted a more modernized platform. Everybody was aware that that rows and columns reporting was there are better ways to do it essentially, and it also just the tools just didn't feel new. Everything kind of felt old, and Tableau is very visually appealing, as everybody knows. Even when you just make a quick bar graph, it just looks great. And I've heard people sort of dismiss that aesthetic component to Tableau, but I've always found it to be very important, because when you have something that looks good, it's much more engaging to people, and they're much more likely to spend some time really sort of thinking about it and working with your dashboard. Tableau also obviously is great at making interactive dashboards, which was not really a thing at Whole Foods, at least very much prior to that. An Excel pivot table with slicers was about as close as you would get most of the time. And finally, this is probably the biggest one. It was the biggest one for me. Development with Tableau is just real fast. A lot of those legacy applications, it's just a very heavy footprint. And so the development you have to do just can take a long time, and you often have to work with multiple teams to get development work done. And the development cycles in Tableau are just so much faster. So that was another constant concern and complaint you would hear from our business users. So that was our environment before we really started using Tableau. Sorry, I'm having some. Computer doesn't know what screen I'm on. Then, in terms of getting our Tableau journey started, it started in a pretty typical way, in that just a few users around Whole Foods started picking up desktop licenses and started using it and fell in love with the client. If I understand right, actually our current VP of Data and Analytics and Tech Apps was the very first user at Whole Foods. And so we got this kind of grassroots thing going where people really were enjoying the tool and really liked it and wanted to do more of it. But they didn't really know how to move forward. And eventually people started to understand, what you can do with server and how that became the logical next step. So we stood up a proof of concept server and started giving people access to it. And that took off really quickly. People absolutely loved it. It started to turn into, I don't know if you know the joke, but proof of concept eventually becomes production on command. That's kind of what happened to us. Eventually, our proof of concept just became an operational system. And so we were trying to catch up and make it actually operational. And so that was the next step, was trying to harden that proof of concept server and stand up a real server and really start to get to work. So after the POC, then we did stand up a real server, hardened it some, and started doing some enterprise development. And initially what we were doing was starting to re-platform some older enterprise reporting over to Tableau server to start to seed it with data and analytics. And it worked okay, except we got a little over our skis and we opened up the floodgates way too wide. And we had a lot of users on there and we just did not have the horsepower to really support it. And so we actually had to end up rolling a few users off, a couple of group constituencies. We had to roll them off for a while until we could really beef up the server and get the right amount of horsepower back there, and then bring them back on the server. But that first round of enterprise development actually got us, it still got us moving because we had much more content on the server at that point. And it also gave the more advanced users a place to go and start publishing dashboards as well as data sources. That initial bit of enterprise deployment also helped us get a set of data sources out there for users to start developing on. And it was always sort of intended to do that, but it wasn't the full intention of that suite of data sources. And so while that was really helpful, it wasn't quite enough to get us where we needed to go in terms of user adoption, because there was a lot of use cases that those data sources weren't really built to cover. Also, as part of that, the team started building out a center of excellence. I'll get into some more detail about all the things that the team did here in a second. But there was a lot of outreach efforts towards all the different analyst groups across the company to get them to start using Tableau and start publishing content. And that was really successful, just to create a community and get people in there and actually doing the work. So one of the first things the team did was to start just doing trainings. And these were kind of like longer form trainings, a couple, 3 hours. They were called 101, 102 trainings. And they were generally done with like a certain section of the business, like a certain team. And those were a great way to get a group of people going and have a team start working on Tableau Server. And it was key because it went over not just how to use the client, but it also went over things like, why are visualizations better? What are the visualization best practices? How do you build a performant workbook? And trying to help people avoid, to the best of our ability, just spreadsheet replacement mentality and building workbooks that seem like a good idea, but then when you get done, they just don't perform, and then nobody likes them or nobody uses them. Back to Eric's thoughts about adoption. The other thing that we worked on was enterprise data source development. So we had that first swath of data sources out there, and that was sort of a proof that there was appetite for people to have these, we called them commoditized data sources. So just the basic data sources that everybody could go and use freely to start their analyses. And we're retail, so we have our core metrics that almost everybody needs to look at. So obvious things like sales by item, spoilage, labor, things like that. And so we built a suite of data sources that was focused just for the analyst community. So they didn't have to go find their own data. They could just go ahead and use what was published and start building their analyses that way. It also really spoke to the one source of truth question that can be hard to get at, because they were viewed as the source of truth. And so if the numbers should match those, and if they didn't, then we would maybe work with people to help them fix their queries against the warehouse. But what was published was the gold standard. And there was also a lot of outreach to users to help teach them how to use those enterprise data sources. Lots of materials that were developed to get them out in front of people, publishing data dictionaries and things like that. So that was a key component. Another thing that was a major factor was Tableau Doctor. If you've been to Tableau Conference, I'm sure you've seen these, if not participated in them. And that's where you work with a Tableau expert to get over some of the whatever questions you might have about the dashboard that you're building. And so after having those initial team member trainings, that Tableau Doctor was kind of the ongoing maintenance where people could come in, ask more advanced questions, get specific about their data, and work through whatever problems they're having. Things changed with COVID, of course, but prior to COVID, these were just held in meeting rooms. It would just be blocked off. And it really became sort of a community and John was one of the people that we would see in there a lot. There are a lot of people that just come by frequently. Sometimes they would have a specific question, but sometimes it was more just hanging out and showing what you're doing, talking about Tableau, getting ideas. So that was really, besides the real tactical component of helping people with whatever problems they have, it was also really helpful just to build that community and build the relationships out in the analytic community at Whole Foods. Tableau Summit was another in-house thing that was put together. This was basically like a mini Tableau conference, but just for Whole Foods. And people flew in from all over the country to attend this. And we did lots of seminars on some Tableau specific things like, I think we had one on table calcs, of course, again, visualization best practices, building performant workbooks. Did lots of user showcases there, which also did help with adoption and getting the data sets that were out there and the dashboards that were out there to get higher higher usage rates and more consumption. Excuse me. And yeah, the other thing that was real valuable doing this in-house was that everybody there was from Whole Foods, so we all had sort of the same data problems and the same data questions. And yeah, if you look at something like the Superstore data set, you know, it's great for proving out examples, but when you take that to your own business has much more specific problems with the data. You know, like we have tons and tons of items that sell at, you know, over 500 stores. You know, how do you manage this in a Tableau dashboard? So getting everybody together to work through those common problems was really, really helpful. At the Tableau Summit, we also did an Iron Biz. If you've ever been to a Tableau conference, I'm sure you've seen it. Prior to doing this, I actually had no idea how it was going to come together, and I was amazed to see it come together. A lot of that had to do with just having great moderators, but it was just exactly what you see at Tableau conference, except, you know, not in a huge stadium. It was just in a very, very large meeting room. But I think we had at least 100 people there. We had 3 participants competing, and we had a couple of great moderators. Shout out to Sam Limerick and Renee Ramirez, who did a great job moderating it. And Renee, actually, he deserves outsized credit for all these things that are up on this board. He's a huge contributor. But that was just another thing that really got people excited about the community and getting more into Tableau and becoming more versed in the client. And then finally, Tableau TV. It was basically like a local TV show, almost like a corporate community access TV show. And that focused on upcoming events. So if there was a Tableau conference coming up, sorry, my dog is in the background, but there was Tableau conference coming up, you know, we'd talk about that and, you know, hope people get prepared for it. Any new dashboard releases or data source releases that were notable, new features that were coming out. We'd help talk about upgrades and also just engage people about, you know, some more broader data issues and questions. Would just be a good place to get out, you know, whatever people needed to talk about in terms of like a data warehouse upgrade or something like that. And then one last thing I wanted to say before moving on from that last slide. You know, I'm speaking to this. I mentioned a couple of people from the team. Yeah, I really am just a messenger here. It was a lot of great team members over the last 3 years that put all those ideas together and made them all happen, and a lot of great leaders and managers. So it's really been wonderful to see everybody do it together. It was very much a team effort and team ideas that were brought together. Learnings from our journey. One of them was to implement analytical governance practices very early. Eric also alluded to this. You know, we have tons of dashboards now published to our environment. We have a large environment, lots of users, and people are putting stuff up all the time. And that's great. We want them to use it. But it creates almost that Wild West feel. And, you know, being a large company with, you know, 95,000 team members, not everybody really needs or is appreciative of the Wild West type of feel. And if you look at like our users in the stores, you know, they need a very clean and curated experience. Their job is to serve our customers, not to go spelunking on Tableau server to try to find like a cool new dashboard that might show the data in a slightly different way. They really need to be able to get in and out and get the information they need very quickly. And so that's one of the things that we're starting to work on a lot right now is trying to split off, you know, basically a separate, you know, Tableau site to give that real curated experience to the people that need that clean, curated experience, and then allow the analyst groups on the other side to be more creative is maybe not the right word, but to just do whatever they need to do. That's, you know, they publish a lot of stuff. It's quick. It's sometimes kind of dirty. That's fine. That's what that job is about. But making sure that the curated experience exists for the people that need it. Also, making sure that people can work. You know, just preventing any access and usage barriers. The team did a really good job of, as you know, we're standing up the real server, you know, getting out and finding the different teams that needed licenses and vetting their use case with them. And they made it really easy to get a couple of desktop licenses and a project where to work on Tableau server. But it wasn't done mindlessly. It was done very thoughtfully and making sure everybody had a real business case. But once that was confirmed, then making it very easy for people to get onto the environment and start working. Training, I talked a little bit, well, some about some of the training things that the team did. And we couldn't have done it without all of that training, I don't think. We still struggle with avoiding the spreadsheet replacement mentality. And you know, that tends to be more with, I think, the viewer community as opposed to the creator community. The creator community has drunk the Kool-Aid a little bit more, I think, but it's been hard with certain components, not with everyone, but sometimes hard to get people past that spreadsheet replacement mentality. And then also considering change management needs. This is something that I had never seen until we released some of our Tableau reporting. All the development work I had ever been involved in, the developer basically led the change management, which, as you can imagine, led to some very mixed results. It was fine for small projects or projects where the customers were pretty tech savvy. But when you had, you know, thousands of people depending on change management, and there were people in the stores, you know, who have very different types of jobs, having a developer lead that change management was a little sketchy. And so we actually brought a change management person onto the team and really started focusing on that as a core component of the project. And I think a lot of us were shocked, having never seen it happen before. But that really smoothed out transition from some of the legacy reporting systems over to our Tableau server instance and some of the reporting that was being published there. To the point, you know, we would have hypercare periods after we had a release, you know, and you're sitting there the next day, you know, all tense and nervous, waiting for the onslaught, you know, as you start to cut over of the onslaught of questions. And more often than not, we just had crickets. You know, everybody knew exactly what they were supposed to be doing. It was all very clearly outlined, and the transition was just very smooth. So that's kind of a, you know, short version of our journey over the last 3 or so years. We do have, I assume, Chris, time for some questions. And like I mentioned, we have some people from Whole Foods here. John Burns, who's one of our users, Ray Sanchez, who's our lead Tableau administrator, and I think we might have Barry Green, who's another one of our partners, but I'm not sure if he's made it on the call yet.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Andrew. Yeah, we definitely have some time for questions, and we got a lot that came in. So this will be more of a panel discussion for sure. So one of the first questions that came in was, hey, could you explain just maybe what were the legacy systems that you migrated from over to Tableau before Tableau?
Oh, right. They were just very, I mean, kind of the ones you would expect, you know, so like, you know, SQL Server-based systems, you know, just those kind of standard like rows and columns type of reporting systems that are a little bit more, you know, they have some more self-serve components, but they don't really have the visualization components available.
Gotcha. The other one was, what's your community mix look like there, as far as like, you know, the developer analysts, you know, maybe the creator explorers versus your straight viewers?
Yeah. Ray, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. So right now we have about probably estimated about maybe 23,000 distinct users on server. roughly about maybe 200 to 20 or so are developers, while everyone else is a viewer and or a web edit user. And a lot of that is, we've seen that growth over the past 1 or 2 years, just kind of a explosion of growth.
Cool. Yeah, and a follow-up question to that would be, how did you identify the people responsible for creating the enterprise data source development? Like, how did you identify those people that created those contents?
So our approach was, we had a team that was on the tech side that was responsible for those enterprise data source, the enterprise data source development. And we would reach out to other users and figure out what those commodity data points really were, and make sure we could get them out there for everyone. One thing we're starting to work on now is a data source certification process. So we can work with different components of the business to vet all of their data sources and then certify those.
Gotcha. And like a follow-up question to that was, how did you optimize the enterprise data source development, balancing size and performance versus what it was intended for? I mean, some of these could literally be a whole nother Tug presentation. Give the short version, I guess.
Yeah, I could talk for a long time about that, and that was one of the areas where I was most deeply involved. A couple of things. One, we created a set of data sources of various levels of aggregation. So and they would have then more history, right? So we'd maybe have one that was like at the store level that had more history, but we couldn't put items in there because that would just get too big. And so then we would maybe have a smaller item one, or an item one that would have just less history. We just did our best to balance it. Is really the short answer. Once multiple table extracts came out, that was a game changer, and we leveraged those very heavily, and we're able to get a lot more data out to the users with that.
Okay, wow, you fielded that one great. That was good. So one question, and I think you already addressed this, but maybe talk about how many cores you do have. Are you guys on the core model versus named user? Maybe what's your environment look like?
Yeah, we have a little over 140 cores. We're not real sure, if core based or user based is the right model for us right at the moment. We're trying to figure some of that out, but we have done core based historically. Ray, do you have anything to add to all that?
Yeah, so it should be 144 cores across 13 nodes. So it's quite the environment.
Okay, all right. Another one from Jonathan here. Can you discuss the curated experience in more detail? Is it separate servers per audience or permission based? How do you categorize all the content for the different audiences? Yeah.
That's a good question that we are figuring out right now. We're planning on doing a separate site. Barry Green did join, and he and I are both working with the Analytics Governance Committee to vet out some of those questions. Do you want to take that, Barry?
Yeah, hey y'all. Yeah, I guess like Andrew said, we're still working on that. I'm really excited about that, though. I feel like that's going to be a game changer for a lot of our users to have that. But we're exploring like using a Tableau workbook that is sort of the front door. I don't know what all you've spoken to already in this call, but right now we're looking at allowing sort of organizations within the business to dictate what content gets into their main support, the folks that they support, and then allowing that list to sort of drive the data source behind a workbook that then surfaces, a very curated list of reports that each of those users get to see.
Cool. And a follow up to that is like, what kind of actionable data, are your users getting, from these dashboards? Do you have any good examples?
Sales. Well, Barry, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah, wow, it's all of it. It ranges the full P&L of a business and you know, food safety and human capital activity. We've really got all of it in there, I think.
Okay. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
What about development? Do y'all actually have, is it mostly the user community? Is it IT responsible for creating all the dashboards? Is it done in one location? How is that done?
Yeah. But both. And we've gone through a reorg this year, which changes quite a bit. But we have a lot of users out there in different analytic teams across the country, excuse me, well, both country and company, that are publishing whatever they need just to do their job and for their team. But most of those like enterprise reports, where the business, is really run on them. Things go out to the stores, things go out to the executives. Those are all, at this point at least, owned by the IT team.
Gotcha. This one, I guess, how does Whole Foods use a schema layer between the raw data and the dashboard development? Do y'all have some schema layer?
Schema layer, I'm not sure how to interpret that. We have a data warehouse, and the team that does all of the, or has done that enterprise data source development work, they had their own schema within that warehouse where they could work independently. And then hopefully a lot of the dashboard development happens on top of those enterprise data sources, but then people can still go publish their own data sources that may be more novel than that set of commoditized data sources. And they might hopefully are getting that information from the data warehouse, but you know how that goes. It could come from a lot of different places. I'm not sure if I'm answering that question, but
No, I think you did a good job on that one. So just two more, and then we can wrap things up here. So do you guys do embedded analytics right now? Any embedded analytics? And second part to that is, are there any tips you guys have for enhancing dashboard responsiveness speed?
Oh, no embedded analytics really, in terms of, I'm interpreting that as like taking a viz and embedding it like in a web page or something like that.
Yeah, like an external vendor portal or something
Right,
like that.
gotcha.
Yeah.
We're not doing anything like that right now. And Ray, do you want to take the tips on performance?
Sure. I mean, the tips that we can provide are just kind of your basic standard best practices. Reduce the crosstabs. Really try not to answer every single question out there in one dashboard. Narrow it down to your top 3 to 5. I can tell for some workbooks it has worked tremendously. Our most used workbook by far, that gets used, like it's just so much more usage than anything else, is also one of the fastest performing dashboards. And then that's probably the reason why. It's a simple line chart of sales throughout the day, with extra details that users can get in there and quickly see what's going on and get out.
Very cool. And we'll close on this last question here. So, and this dovetails nicely into, I think, Eric's presentation, sort of goes full circle here. So what criteria are you using to measure the success or adoption of your deployment? How are you guys measuring that success?
Yeah, that's a good one. We do some usage reporting. It could be better. I mean, we could spend more time looking at our usage stats. I think in large part, we've measured the success by our ability to move users off of other systems and reports that we didn't want them using over to these newer reports, which are where they are supposed to be running their business, particularly in terms of the enterprise reporting. So I think that's been one of the biggest measures of success. In addition just to general usage across the platform. Do you guys have anything else to add?
Hey Andrew, this is John. I maybe just add, when people are, executives or anyone's really having conversations now, are they using the same data, right, when they're having those conversations? And I think that's been greatly improved.
Okay. Well, great. Andrew, team, appreciate you guys taking the time. This was a great presentation. Everybody, again, virtual round of applause for you guys. This has been a great event, great turnout. I appreciate everyone joining us today. I did put some links down in the chat for our presenter surveys as well as the event itself. If you guys could take a second just to fill that out. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing everyone at our next TUG event, which will be February 25th. You guys have a great day. Talk to you later.